It's Thursday evening, which means it is time for the Lions Grid. Hello, everybody. I am your host, Kevin Marhine, joined today by Jeffrey Raymond. Jeff, how are you doing on this Thursday evening?
Doing great, even though you cannot see me. I promise the listeners, the viewers, that I will have a video camera by next week. Take that to the bank.
Oh, are you guaranteeing it?
I am, in
As
fact,
we
guaranteeing it. I will have a video camera next week.
That is, I mean, that's the highest level of obligation that any self-respecting Detroit fan can have. So we're gonna have to hold you to it, I guess. But the nice thing about today's episode, Jeffrey, is that we get to celebrate the ascendance to the throne of the NFC North, the Detroit Lions. They got that win at Lambeau. We had the show before the Thursday night game. We all picked the Lions to win. And sure enough, they went into Lambeau, got a victory. Not something they've done a whole lot in our lifetime. We'll talk about more about the game, but what are your how are you feeling about this team with where they're currently at the moment?
I mean, not only did they go to Lambeau and get the win, they looked absolutely dominant. They dominated the Packers the entire game. I know it kind of got they got on a roll towards the end of the game as far as scoring and kind of making the scoreboard seem a little closer than it was, but the Packers were absolutely outmatched in their own dojo.
And it's very impressive the fact that the Lions were able to do that in Lambeau. And welcoming into the show right now, hey Joe, how are you doing?
Doing great.
Good to have you. We were just talking about.
I overslept just a little bit, so I had a busy day.
No worries. Happy you can make it. We were just talking about just giving some initial thoughts about that Lions victory as they are now the official king of the North. What were your thoughts watching the Lions be able to go into Lambeau and get that win?
They beat them up pretty good in the first half and just coasted in the second half. But I mean, they really showed dominance in the division last game. 2-1, and now Lions 3-1. Chicago's playing tonight, 0-4, trying to get their first win. Minnesota's got one win, so it's looking good for Detroit for the remainder of the season. But that's no gimme. You still got to go out there and play football. But I mean, we've set ourselves up in a good position, and I think this next game is going to be a trap game, so it's going to be tough to go into Carolina and beat a winless Carolina team.
Well, we'll certainly talk more about the game against the Packers and, of course, talk about this weekend's game against the Panthers. But we already talked about one of the games from last week, but we'll go ahead here and kick off the Grind the Grid segment and take a look at what else happened last week around the NFL. So we'll go ahead, we'll cue up the music, we'll bring up the slides, and we'll take a look here as we dive in. Again, as we mentioned, the Lions beating the Packers at home 34-20, claiming that NFC North crown. The Falcons and the Jaguars played across the pond in London. We'll talk a little bit more about that game in a moment, and the special Toy Story review that they had broadcasting the game. But the Jaguars won that game 23-7, handling business against the Falcons. The Rams beating the Colts in overtime with a Matthew Stafford touchdown pass to Puka Nacua. We'll talk more about Puka Nacua in a moment. Then we had the Ravens and the Browns playing in an AFC North matchup. No Deshaun Watson in that game, and the Ravens handled business 28-3. Speaking of the Carolina Panthers, who will be playing this weekend, they did play the Minnesota Vikings last week. The Vikings won that game 21-13. The Panthers still looking for their first win on the season, as Joe mentioned. Then, in a bit of a surprise, Joe Burrow still dealing with that injury for the Cincinnati Bengals, and the Bengals not looking very good at all. They went into Tennessee and lost that game 27-3. Next up, claiming the throne down in the NFC South, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who were squaring off with the New Orleans Saints. They won that game 26-9. Then an AFC East matchup, the Bills getting a dominant win over the Dolphins, 48-20 the final score there. In a game of who wanted to lose more, The Broncos were able to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat against the Chicago Bears. The Bears still winless on the season. The Broncos winning that game 31-28. The Eagles were able to outlast the Commanders in overtime, winning that game 34-31 and staying unbeaten, a perfect 4-0 on the season so far. The Steelers, Kenny Pickett went down, and the Texans got a win 30-6 as CJ Stroud turned in another strong performance for the Texans. The Chargers beating up on the Raiders in an AFC West matchup, winning that game 24-17 at home. San Francisco also improved to 4-0, beating the NFC West divisional rivals Cardinals. They won that game 35-16. Then in a homecoming game for Ezekiel Elliott, the Patriots and the Cowboys squared off down in AT&T Stadium, Jerry Jones land, and the Cowboys rolled that one 38-3. A very strong defensive performance against Mac Jones and the Patriots in that one. In a star-studded New York matchup between the Jets and the Kansas City Chiefs, the Chiefs hang on to win that game 23-20 in what was probably Zach Wilson's best performance on the year. And then probably one of the most disappointing teams in prime time this season, the New York Giants lose at home to the Seahawks 24-3 in what was an absolute smackdown on Monday Night Football. And that's what happened around the league last week in our Grind the Grid. So, gentlemen, some surprising outcomes there. You know, I think certainly seeing the Bengals struggle as much as they are a bit of a surprise. But are there any of those games that you gentlemen found to be particularly surprising, any of those outcomes? Jeff, let's start with you there.
I think that the Bengals, actually, I want to start with one that did not surprise me.
Oh.
Well, I guess for the Titans, yes, they got the win there, but I think the Bengals kind of did that to themselves. Joe Burrow is dealing clearly with a fairly significant calf injury. I mean, he cannot move around in the pocket. They basically turned him into the quick game, and he's going a bunch of short passes, and the defense is sitting on it, and they cannot move the ball. So he's not mobile. He's not be able to use his elite athleticism when he's healthy to kind of get around the pocket and get outside to make plays. And I just don't understand why he's out there when he's clearly hurt.
Yeah, it's interesting to see teams sort of do that sort of mental math to say, should we risk playing the player when they're hurt, or does it make more sense to have him miss a couple games up front so that he can get healthy for the long run? And certainly, so far, the strategy the Bengals have chosen doesn't seem to have paid real dividends for them. Joe, what are your thoughts there? Any of the outcomes from last week's game surprise you?
I thought the Detroit Lions set the tone with blowouts in the NFL last week. I mean, Detroit comes in, blows out the Packers, and then we see however many games there were, over 70% of the games were blowouts. Mm-hmm. Now, one game that surprised me was the Commanders and the Eagles going into overtime. I thought the Eagles are a much better team than the Commanders, but they put up a good fight, and the Commanders nearly won that football game. And then Jets and Chiefs, it was a close game, and nobody really saw the Jets being competitive, but Zach Wilson played a good football game. And then San Francisco, showing that, in my opinion, what we'll get to is being the best team in the NFC. And, that's essentially all I have about last week, because the rest of the games were blowouts. Besides Chicago and Denver, Denver, was able to squeak out that victory in a game, but neither team looked good in that game. So that's my opinion about last week.
Yeah, that was a beautiful disaster.
Yeah, that was Chicago was definitely in control of that game and just found a way to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. They did what used to be the same old Lions move of finding a way to lose a game. That's what they did against Denver, and surprisingly, Denver was able to capitalize on that, because Denver is definitely not good. And speaking of teams that aren't good, not much has changed in our hot butts segment this week. We do have a new addition, and we almost had somebody drop off. I think to Joe's point, the Washington Commanders have been a bit of a surprise with how well they've played. So Ron Rivera still is in our list But I think he has an opportunity. That team is actually playing surprisingly well with Sam Howell as the quarterback. If they make the playoffs, he could definitely be able to save his job. But of course, the hottest butt I think at the moment is Matt Eberflus. We'll talk about that in a moment when we do our buy or sell segment. And then, of course, we still have Kevin O'Connell, the Minnesota head coach, Brandon Staley. I think he's doing enough where as long as he makes the playoffs, he should potentially be safe. Josh McDaniels, I think, is behind Matt Eberflus, is probably has the next hottest butt and a guy to keep an eye on. Frank Reich, I don't think he's actually going to get fired. It's his first year with Carolina. I think he's seen as being a bit of a quarterback guru. And right now, I know things aren't going well with Bryce Young, but I think they'll give him at least another year to try and get right the ship there. And he's on here, but I think he doesn't have too hot of a butt. And as mentioned, I think Ron Rivera, his team could get him off this list if they continue to play well like they did against the Eagles. The new addition to the list is one Brian Daboll. The Giants made the playoffs last year, but again, they have been terrible in the 3 games they've lost. They're terrible in the first half of every game, and outside of that game against the Cardinals, where they were able to come back in the second half, they have just been a terrible team. And it looks like the Danny Dimes experiment may be coming to an end because we're just not seeing the results on the field for the Giants. And then, of course, we still have our one defensive coordinator on here, Vance Joseph for the Broncos. I don't know if beating the Bears is enough to get him off of this list, but we'll see what happens. Maybe if they can string together some more wins, he'll be able to save himself. But certainly, I think still a pretty hot butt there for Mr. Vance Joseph. So, gentlemen, we taking a look at the coaches there. Some of them we'll talk about a little more in depth here in our buy or sell segment. But we'll actually start with a player. And me and Jeff were talking about this particular player before the show here today because I had outbid him in fantasy football in our fantasy league and then proceeded to promptly trade him away, not thinking that he would be able to sustain this hot start he's been off to. But Puka Nacua has been just lighting things up. No receiver in league history has caught more passes in their first 4 games than Nacua has. Nacua currently leads the NFL in receptions and is in second place with 501 receiving yards, second to only the Vikings' Justin Jefferson. He's on pace to have a 2,100-yard receiving season, which would absolutely obliterate Calvin Johnson's single-season mark of 1,964 yards that was set back in 2012. Gentlemen, do you think that Puka Nacua will win the Offensive Rookie of the Year? Are you buying or selling this? Joe, what are your thoughts?
I'm selling this. There's no way that he's going to keep up this amount of production, especially for a rookie. And plus the general Offensive Rookie of the Year award goes to a quarterback. And I just think the quarterback position is too much of a sexy position to give to a wide receiver. So, I mean, I don't think that it's going to go to Puka Nacua because I don't think he can sustain his production, especially with Cooper Kupp coming back and him not being relied on as the number one. Plus, he's going to have to stay healthy, and teams are going to start game planning a little bit more to have him under coverage.
Excellent points there, Jeffrey. What are your thoughts? Are you buying or selling Puka for Offensive Rookie of the Year?
I am absolutely selling. I agree with Joe. The quarterback is the sexy position and typically gets the nod in these type of races. I do think that the Stafford Puka Nacua connection is real. I mean, Stafford was throwing dimes. He's trusting him in situations, and the numbers speak for themselves there. But with Cooper Kupp kind of looming in the horizon of his return, they're both kind of the same type of receiver. I think they could complement each other really well, but I think it's going to eat into Puka Nacua's volume. So I'm definitely selling.
Now, this may be surprising as I traded him away, but I'm going to channel some optimism here. I definitely agree with you two gentlemen's point that if CJ Stroud continues to play the way he's playing as a QB, he's definitely more likely to be the offensive rookie of the year. But let's say Puka stays healthy. Let's say Matt Stafford stays healthy. I think that if he can put up close to those projected numbers that they're saying he's on pace for and stay healthy and stay involved in the offense, if he can do that, I think that he would actually win the award just because what he would be doing then. Typically, when a quarterback wins, people have they win it over other guys who have decent seasons. If Puka can maintain this pace, he would be having a historic season, and I think that would give him the edge over the quarterback. I think that's the only time that a skill position player, can beat a quarterback is if they have truly a historic season. So if he can do that, if he can stay healthy, if the offense can keep rolling, I think Puka could win. So I'll buy it, but that is sort of my worry is that I don't know if he can do all those things. You gentlemen brought up a lot of good points about why he may not be able to do it, but I'll be optimistic. I'll buy here on Puka, even though I traded him away in fantasy football.
I'm still mad about that.
Well, I'm a little salty about it too now because I did not get the return that I could have gotten on that. So that's a little upsetting. Moving on to a discussion that Joe sort of previewed for us. There are two teams currently in the NFL who are 4-0. Both of them happen to be in the NFC. One is the Philadelphia Eagles. The other is the San Francisco 49ers. Gentlemen, of these two 4-0 teams, which one are you buying and which one are you selling as the best in the NFL? Jeff, let's start with you.
I am buying the San Francisco 49ers mainly because they have been dominant in every single game they've played. I mean, Christian McCaffrey's production has been wild. Brock Purdy basically came back from the surgery to repair his elbow and is continuing where he left off. And that offense is rocking and rolling, and that defense is really good as well. The reason I'm selling Philadelphia is they've kind of gotten off to a slow start as far as their kind of offensive production. They were dominant most of the season last year, but this year it's been kind of taken a little bit for them to get on. I mean, they've won all their games, but they tended to have slow starts in them. But it's a long season, and I think Philadelphia will get its reins in. But right now, San Francisco 49ers.
Gotcha. And before we get Joe's response here, we did get Nick Thompson commenting on Twitch here, just talking about our Puka discussion, saying that he is the best. Puka does have a good chance because McVay sort of can sense his value and is going to continue to use him as a really solid weapon, even when Cooper Kupp comes back. So Nick voicing his opinion there on Twitch. Joe, when it comes to the debate between San Francisco and Philadelphia, we heard Jeff there going with the Niners. Who are you going with? Who are you buying in this situation?
I'm going to buy the San Francisco 49ers as well. I think they're the most complete football team. On offense, they can put up the points. And on defense, they can shut down the opposing opposition at any point in time. Any point in time, they can play complete football. And I think the problem with Philadelphia is, number one, Jalen Hurts, no pun intended. I'm not a fan of Jalen Hurts. And I'm not a fan of the Philadelphia Eagles this year. I think that they're overrated. And I think that they're going to be exposed as the year goes on. And I think they're too arrogant. I think the Philadelphia Eagles are too much of an arrogant football team after not having won the Super Bowl. And they come this year being such favorites. I think they're a little bit full of themselves. And I think, more of the just doing enough to get by and playing dominant football for the San Francisco 49ers is the way to go. So, I mean, that's my opinion. I'm buying San Francisco and I'm selling Philadelphia.
So, yeah, I mean, a lot of good points there raised by you as well. I guess I'm going to just be the contrarian in today's episode, and I will buy the Philadelphia Eagles in this one. You guys, I mean, I think we're spoiled for choice in this particular question. Both San Francisco and Philly, I think, are two really good teams and could very well be playing for the NFC Championship game. Now, hopefully, our Lions will be able to interject themselves into that conversation. But right now, both Philly and San Francisco look great. Jalen Hurts he's won 21 of his last 22 starts, which both him and Brock Purdy, all they seem to do is win when they're in the game. So I think really they're both great options. But I think the thing that I like about Philadelphia is right now San Francisco, a lot of their offensive success is coming through Christian McCaffrey. And he's a great player, but we know that right now he's staying healthy, right? I think with the Philadelphia Eagles, they have multiple different weapons that have been helping them drive the offense. So they're less dependent on a single player. So an injury to one of their stars wouldn't derail them as much as I think as if an injury happened to Christian McCaffrey. So I'm going to buy Philadelphia with that being the sort of the reason why. But certainly I definitely can appreciate your guys' choice there on the 49ers because, again, they are a solid team, both offensive and defensively. Really, if you're a fan of either team, I think you should be excited about your team's prospects as we get closer to the end of the season and head into the playoffs. We talked a little bit about Matt Eberflus earlier when we were doing our hot butt section, but there's rumors out there that had it not been a short week, as the Chicago Bears are taking on the Washington Commanders tonight in Thursday Night Football, that he would have been fired after last week's loss to the Broncos. There are talks about blowing the whole thing up in Chicago between firing Eberflus, trying to find a trade partner for Justin Fields, and really just they have the two first-round picks next year, and right now it's the number 1 pick and the number 2 pick in the draft. So there's rumors out there about it just being over in Chicago. Are you gentlemen buying or selling the fact that Matt Eberflus would be fired after tonight's game if they lose to the Washington Commanders? Joe, do you think he can survive losing to the Commanders tonight?
No, I don't. I think after last week that they want to make sure the season is a complete fail before they fire him. Like you can string together some victories, and I think if they win tonight, he's not going to be fired. But you lose tonight, you have, and they typically don't like to fire head coaches, before the halfway point of the season. So it's a little bit disappointing that they would feel so bad with their decision making that they would fire him so early on into the season. But I mean, they've just looked so bad, but they might have no other choice than to fire him and put in an intern head coach, So this is a buy for me. This is a team that could very well lose their head coach after tonight's game if they lose.
Jeffrey, do you agree with Joe there? Are you buying they send them out to pasture if they lose to the Commanders tonight?
I could only see them stringing out maybe one more game after this because their franchise ownership typically goes slow. So yeah, I'm gonna sell this for now. I think also if he wins tonight, he's safe. But yeah, for me right now, it's a sell.
Yeah, you bring up a great point about ownership. I really don't know what the Bears will do. They're kind of an enigma. They kind of do things at times that don't make a lot of sense. Really, at this point, whether he wins tonight or what happens, it really seems like the writing's on the wall, right? I don't know how the relationship hasn't gotten to the point now where it's just whether he's fired after tonight's game or he's fired in a couple of weeks or he's fired, after Thanksgiving. At this point, it just seems like he's going to be fired. So, for me, if I was the person in charge, I'd rip off the Band-Aid quick. So I'm gonna buy this, but Jeff, you bring up a great point where it's kind of hard to say with Chicago ownership what exactly they will do because they have ever since they fired Lovie Smith after going 10-6 and making the playoffs, it has been a comedy of errors for the Bears, and they have not really looked as good as they did when they were making those Super Bowl appearances. Now, talking a little bit here about actual broadcasts of games, as we were talking about the Kansas City and New York game, I mentioned that it was a star-studded affair. You had, of course, Taylor Swift there, along with Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman and Blake Lively and a ton of other celebrities. Of course, it is New York, but as fans of football, gentlemen, are you getting tired of all this attention that's being paid to Taylor Swift and the other celebrities now at the Chiefs game? Is this starting to get to the point where it's too much for you? Or is it something that you enjoy being able to see them do these cut shots to them in the crowd? Jeff, what are your thoughts about? Are you buying or selling all these celebrities being involved in the game?
I am indifferent about celebrities, to be honest with you. Like, I mean, if they're in the crowd, that's fine if they want to do some cut shots because they're famous. I mean, they clearly were playing to the Taylor Swift fan base at the beginning. I don't know if you all saw the beginning of the broadcast, but they basically were like, "Hey, Swifties, here's football," and it was very strange. I don't know, but the only thing to me, I guess it doesn't really matter because I've had to put up with the waiting all day for Sunday night song before football. I mean, man, they just put some highlights on there and then start the game. Anyway, I'm going on a rant. But really the only thing that I dislike is like right when Travis Kelce scored a touchdown, the team was getting together to do like touchdown dance. It was a great football moment, and then they panned to her right after he caught the ball. It's like let the action play out on the field a bit and then do some scanning.
Well, my mom's inquiring. She joined us a little late, so she didn't get to hear your guaranteed that you'll have your camera
Yeah.
for next
I
episode.
guaranteed the audience that I will have a video camera next week.
But he's having some technical difficulties that are preventing us from being able to see his gorgeous face and flowing locks. But he has promised us he will get it resolved for next week. So we'll see then. Joe, what are your thoughts here? Are you a fan of all of the focus on the celebrities, or could you do without it?
No, by all means, invite all the attention seekers into the field of Arrowhead Stadium and let the camera diverse from the game and let them focus on the star-studded Kansas City Chiefs and let them bring all the hype to the football team because the destruction and the downfall of the team will be that much sweeter this year when they start losing and they don't repeat as a Super Bowl champion. I hope they don't make it there, and I'm hoping that with all this attention that they get shut down sooner than later, or probably let it build up some hype and then get shut down. You can't have distractions from football, and they seem to be playing into Hollywood a little bit more than being concerned about playing football. So, my opinion.
Yeah, I think for me, I would say it's smart on the NFL's part because they're they're always trying to grow their audience. So they're trying to leverage this new resource that has just shown up at the games that's free to them, like cutting to a shot of Taylor Swift. They already have the cameras there, they're already positioned, so it doesn't cost them anything, and it's definitely helped, I think, increase viewership and things like that. I know ticket prices for games have been soaring, so I get why the NFL is doing it. For me, as as a fan who's tuning in all the time, I don't necessarily care to see Taylor Swift's reaction every time. When Jason, when Travis Kelce catches the pass, I don't need to see it, but it is it is a good reminder, I guess, that celebrities are people too, and they like football as well. As my dad points out, though, and we'll put it on the screen, he's going with it's bullshit. That's how he feels about the situation. Speaking of broadcasts, I mentioned it. The Jacksonville Falcons game. They did this whole Toy Story, Pixar, Andy's Room broadcast. I don't know if either of you saw that, but it kind of reminded me of that old backyard football franchise for video games.
Yeah.
But are you guys buying or selling that? Was that something you enjoyed and would like to see more of, or do you think it's just another novelty as the NFL is trying to capture bigger audience? Joe, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's a buy. I'm all for the NFL getting a bigger audience, educating young people because when you're young, there's nothing like watching a football game when you're young and getting into the fun of football. When you're young, everything's better because everything's new. So I mean, what a better way to introduce football to the youth than through Andy's toy room, and have that segment of graphics with all that. I thought it was fun. I watched the entire fourth quarter in that and just checked it out, and saw what it was going on. It's a little bit glitchy. They need to clean up some of the glitches. But I thought that they should do it again, and that it's a good way to invite younger users to watch football.
Jeff, what are your thoughts here?
I am buying this. I put it on the game, and I was just kind of watching it side by side on my phone and the TV had the game on, and it was pretty slick how close it was to the actual action with downplayed graphics, obviously from real life, but yeah, and anecdotally, I mean, when I was in the office this week, people were saying that their kids watched a lot of it, and they typically don't like watch football with them because I know a lot of football fans at work, and yeah, just anecdotally, it got kids involved. And I agree with Joe; they're educating youth about football, getting them excited about the sport that we all love. It's great. It made me think about like when I first started watching football. I like it. It's a buy.
Looks like my parents are definitely in agreement with us here. Dad going, it's cool, it's a buy. Of course, the part that he would sell, he's not a fan of Booger McFarland.
Bring back the Booger Mobile.
Just no Booger. And my mom here being a fan of the flames behind the players as they were scoring. I certainly liked it. I think it's really cool, the technology, Jeff, to your point, the fact that how it closely mirrors the actual action in the game is pretty cool. I would certainly like to see it continue to evolve because the player models themselves were pretty generic. There wasn't much that there wasn't like looking at Trevor Lawrence as the QB. The QB could have been anybody. It just happened to have his number. But that's nitpicking, right? And if this continues to be popular and they can continue to refine the technology, I think it could be really cool. But it was a great first start, and I certainly would like to see more of it throughout the season. With sort of the generic NFL questions out or buy or sell stuff out of the way now, gentlemen, we'll turn our attention here to two Lion-specific ones. This first one coming based off of his performance the last couple of weeks, particularly against the Packers here. Do you think that Sam Laporta is a top 5 tight end in the NFL? Has he established himself as that? I will point out that he is currently a top 5 NFL or a top 5 tight end in terms of fantasy football points. But do you think he is done enough to establish himself here in the early part of the season as one of the best in the NFL? Jeff, what are your thoughts?
I'm a buy with this. He's getting a lot of targets right out of the gate here, and he's taking absolute advantage of it. And I mean, from a football standpoint and fantasy football standpoint and in real life, you're looking at performance here. He has been producing, and he after the top like 3, 4, 5, the tight ends, it gets kind of iffy as far as fantasy goes and as far as the inconsistency actually out on the field. So I'm actually buying. He's eating and feasting out there.
Joe, what are your thoughts? Buy or sell here?
I'm going to say through 4 games, yes. As in the 4 games that he's played in so far, that's a yes. He's been a top 5 tight end. Now, as the season rolls on, he's going to have some growing pains. He's going to have some setbacks. He's going to have some teams, making note of him and playing defense accordingly. So, I mean, if you ask me, about tight ends, I don't know a lot of good tight ends in the football league. So, I mean, so far he's been really good, and that's no reason to think that he's not going to be still really good throughout the remainder of the season. So I'm going to have to buy this as well.
Yeah, my parents are against it. They're both going. My dad giving us the no, my mom the not yet. My dad specifically calling out Jeffrey and taking exception with his points. But I think in this one for me, I am also going to buy. And I will say that Jeff, to your point earlier, you have Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews, George Kittle. Those are probably the top 3. TJ Hawkinson is probably deserving to be in there as well. He is the highest paid tight end. He has had some mistakes for the Vikings this year with some costly fumbles, but he's also seen a good amount of production. And then I would put Sam Laporta in that group. I think what's been cool about him is unlike Eric Ebron or TJ Hawkinson when we drafted them so early in drafts. It's nice to see a tight end actually come in and contribute. Both of those guys we took in the first round and kind of wanted them to come in and make an immediate impact on the roster. And Sam Laporta, being a second round pick, has come in and done just that. So I buy as well because I think that they're going to continue to utilize him. I know that St. Brown is a little banged up here, and it's questionable whether or not he'll be playing in Sunday's game. So if there's no Amon-Ra St. Brown against the Panthers, I would definitely look for Sam Laporta to play a bigger role moving forward because there aren't a whole lot of other options on the offense, and he has certainly proven himself quite capable. Now, another top 5 question. Would you gentlemen buy or sell the fact that the Detroit Lions so far through these 4 games have proven themselves to be a top 5 team in the NFL? Obviously, we talked about Philadelphia and San Francisco earlier, but do you think they are part of that top tier of teams in the NFL? Joe, what are your thoughts here? We'll start with you.
It really depends on how they play against the Carolina Panthers. The Carolina Panthers are 0-4. Now, if Detroit comes out and they play a dominant football game and they win, I think that's going to be a really tough thing to do against Carolina. So, I mean, if they can beat Carolina handily and not fall into a trap or a letdown of momentum or just going out there and not living up to playing Carolina to your fullest potential, then then they're not taking every game seriously like they should and trying for that home field advantage, trying for that first round bye. So if they can beat Carolina, yes, they're a top 5 football team, in my opinion.
Jeffrey, what are your thoughts here?
I am, for context, this is who's in my top 5 right now. San Francisco 1, Philadelphia, Kansas City 2, Philadelphia 3, Buffalo 4. Then I feel like 5 onward, there's a group of like teams that I see as even, and Detroit is one of them. I'd actually kind of give the edge to Miami right now as far as dominating performances. I know we dominated, but they ran absolute circles around people. So I think that Detroit is like of that group that I would put in that 5th slot. I think they're high up there, but I would give actually the nod to Miami. So I'm going to sell.
Yeah, I think I definitely appreciate a lot of what Joe said and a lot of the points you mentioned there, Jeffrey, as well. So I actually am going to sell this one. I don't think they're far off from the top 5. I think they are very close. They're definitely in the top 10 teams in the NFL, and I think they have certainly a chance to establish themselves as being a top 5 team. Joe mentioned obviously they have to handle business here against the Carolina Panthers on Sunday. But they also have the following week a game against Tampa Bay, and Tampa Bay is currently leading the NFC South, so that'll be a good test to see where they're at because Tampa Bay is, I think, another one of those teams that could be in that top 10 category with the way that Baker Mayfield and that defense for Tampa Bay has been looking pretty spicy. So I think we'll get a better idea here shortly. What if they have earned a spot in the top 5 or if they're just a top 10 team. But right now, I think I will sell as well, just because, again, Jeff, a lot of the teams you mentioned between Miami, Buffalo, Philadelphia, San Francisco. My dad also mentioned Dallas. I think those are certainly all teams that are right there. So there's a little bit of a log jam up there once you start getting into that 4, 5, 6, 7 areas. So it's it's interesting, and my father, of course, being very anti-Lions, has we'll take a look here at some of his comments. He's selling, of course, says the Lions suck, although they are currently in first place in the NFC North. Jeffrey, he would like you to acknowledge the Cowboys.
They're up there.
He's a big fan of the Dolphins. My mom hoping to see more consistency out of them. My dad telling us to lay off the Kool-Aid.
Never.
It's Kool-Aid today. It's actually Gatorade. It's cool blue, so it's still it's kind of like Kool-Aid, but and of course this gem, they are in the top 32 teams. That is technically true. They are in the top 32 teams. But something that might be a little bit painful for my father. Let's talk here. We briefly have discussed that victory in Lambeau. As mentioned, there is a new king. The king has died. Long live the king. The Lions are in first place in the NFC North. Gentlemen, we talked about it. That first half for the Lions was pretty spectacular. They jumped out to a 27-3 lead. They outgained the Packers 284 yards to 20 in that first half. Um, as my father particularly knows, David Montgomery scored 3 times in his return from injury. My dad had him on the bench in fantasy football.
I had him on the bench too.
Oh, Joe, I'm sorry for you.
No.
It doesn't hurt me as much for my father, but for you, Joe, I do feel sorry. He was a big part of how they jumped out to that early lead. Jared Goff, as he was called by Fitzmagic on the Prime cast, the poor man's Matt Ryan. He had that early interception, but after that, he responded well, led the team down, scored a touchdown, and he continues to look good. Aiden Hutchinson continues to just. It's rare that there's I think a lot of players when you're taken early in the draft, there's a lot of expectations on you, and he continues to deliver on being a number 2 pick in the 2022 draft. There was some times last year where I think we were getting a little concerned that he might not pan out and might not be worthy of that pick, but he has come out here this season already and really established himself as being a pillar of this Lions franchise and is playing extremely well. Jerry Jacobs, the cornerback who is undrafted, who has been the target for a lot of teams. They've been beating up on him. He was able to have 2 interceptions in this game, and it was the first time that a Lions cornerback since Dick LeBeau back in 1968 had 2 interceptions at Green Bay. He also had 5 tackles and 4 passes defended. Had a fantastic performance for a guy who has been struggling a little bit. It was, we talked about it. It was a great first half, and then they did what they needed to do in the second half to get to the win. Is there anything about that game, gentlemen, that you feel we should mention that we haven't covered already? Jeff, any thoughts from you here?
Lambeau Field and Arrowhead Stadium are the toughest places to play if you're a road team. And Green Bay has been looming over us several years. The bad man, Aaron Rodgers, he's gone now. It's a new era, and it feels good to look out there and see a team that actually looks decent. Not even just decent, dominating. Just feels good to be a Lions fan. It's great.
Joe, what are your thoughts here?
I thought the Lions played safe in the second half. They get out to that first half lead, and everybody's like, "Oh, the game's over with." And we saw this last week in the NFL. We saw a lot of blowouts, but still we saw some comebacks by some teams this season. By 21 points or more, and it's like, okay, up 27-3. That's pretty much game in hand. Packers aren't looking too good. But imagine if we get a SOL, same old Lions, where a team comes back from that and beats us. That'll really deflate us. So we coasted in the third quarter. We put up a touchdown in the fourth, and did enough to get the victory. We played safe, but not the greatest second half.
Yeah, definitely a much stronger first half performance. But to your point, Joe, they did do enough to get the win there, and I think they've set themselves up beautifully, right, for the beginning of the season. Through the first 4 games, the first quarter of the season, they're now 3-1, currently sitting in first place in the NFC North. They're in a great position for the rest of the year now, and that win against the Packers in Lambeau, a field where they have struggled mightily throughout our lifetime, is impressive. I think. Obviously, around the league, the Lions, the impression of this team has been positive, and people have been, the expectations are growing for this team, and we see that reflected in the fact that game that I mentioned between the Lions and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers has been flexed to the afternoon spot and is America's game of the week next week in the 4:25 spot. So,
Suck it, Dallas.
it's we're playing well in prime time. We're playing well in fields, and it's going great for the Lions right now. So if they can continue the start that they're off to, and Joe brings up a good point, and we'll talk about it here in a moment when we talk about the game day storylines for the matchup against the Panthers. But as long as they avoid a letdown here and can capitalize and get a win against the winless Panthers, they'll be 4-1 and really in the driver's seat in the NFC North. So now we'll talk a little bit here about our champs and chumps from the game from this week. My champ is going to be David Montgomery. He came in here and, there was, I certainly was a little skeptical. Mostly because I love the Swagakaze and wanted to see Williams return to the Lions. But there were people out there who said, no, wait. David Montgomery is essentially a better version of Williams. And he came out there against the Packers, and he really helped establish a physical, gritty mentality that really helped us dominate them in the first half. So he is my champ of the week. And then the chump is going to be Quay Walker, the second-year linebacker for the Packers, who now apparently should be known for helping to find the Packers lose games to the Lions, whether it's that penalty that he committed by jumping over the center on the field goal attempt that let us get that touchdown in the fourth quarter, or last year when he shoved the medical staff and shoved the ref. He just seems to keep making boneheaded mistakes, and so Quay Walker, the Packers linebacker, my chump of the week. Jeff, who's your champ and who's your chump for this week?
My chump is Ryan Fitzpatrick, calling our Lion Gosling a poor man's Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan, that's Matt Ryan slander. 2, that's Jared Goff slander. Come on, man. You got to recognize some game here. Champ Jared Goff for going on that post-game interview and absolutely embarrassing Fitz.
Joe, who's your champ? Who's your chump?
I'm going to agree with you on the champ. David Montgomery is the champ. 3 touchdowns, almost over 100 yards. The chump, Jordan Love. Everybody's talking about succession for the Green Bay Packers. And is he the next great quarterback in Green Bay? And I just didn't think that he looked like that successor, or at least an elite quarterback in Green Bay to be. So, he's the chump.
Yeah, he definitely. I think when Aaron Rodgers was with the Packers, he was clearly the best quarterback in the NFC North. Matt Stafford gave him a run for his money at times, and Kirk Cousins, but he owned everybody. The proof was just in the results of the games. It doesn't look like Jordan Love will be able to sort of recapture that because right now I would certainly put both Jared Goff and even Kirk Cousins, I think, above him in terms of the quarterback rankings in the North. So great points there from you, Joe. My dad is also mentioning that the MVP, his champ, would be the Lions' offensive line, and that's fair. Without them, they would not have been as successful on the ground with David Montgomery. So kudos to that offensive line. Benefits to them. It's his first year playing. Slow your roll, Joe. He's being a Packers. Stop smoking. Being a Packers apologist over there. My father is on the Book of Faces. Well, we've talked about last week's game. Now, obviously, the focus shifts to this weekend's game against the Panthers. As Joe mentioned, I think it's important to avoid a trap here against a team that should be hungry for their first win of the season. But I think one interesting thing to note in this game is obviously the outcome of last year's game. The Panthers won at home. Not only did they beat the Lions last year, but they really ran the ball down their throats. And that loss ended up being one of the reasons why they did not make the playoffs last year during that push. So I think the fact that the Panthers beat them, the fact that the way they beat them, and the impact that outcome had on their season, I'm hoping that's enough to help the Lions avoid a sort of letdown here. We saw them go into Arrowhead the first week of the season, get a win against the Chiefs, and then they sort of had a letdown at home against Seattle. Not that Seattle isn't a good team, but I think Seattle, I think that's a team we could beat if we played them again. The Panthers, certainly, again, winless, looking for their first win. But I think we are going to avoid a letdown to them just because we are kind of pissed off about what happened last year. It's Derek Barnes and a lot of the other guys have said. Derek Barnes was quoted as saying, "Of course, big game for us. We owe them one." They have sort of circled this game. They remember what happened with the Panthers last year. They're at Ford Field this year. I think that those hate fires are going to be burning deep in their stomachs, and Dan Campbell's going to have them hungry for some kneecaps this Sunday. But Joe, I know you mentioned that you're a little bit concerned about the letdown and the trap here. Any thoughts about if last year's game is going to impact the outcome this Sunday?
Well, I was going with Carolina, but after your pregame prep speech, I'm going to have to go with the Lions now.
Winning you over. Jeffrey, what are your thoughts here?
I think Joe alluded to it earlier. This might be a trap game. That's what scares me the most. I mean, I could see us either coming out there and dominating, or they could make this a chippy game, keep the score low, and eke out that first win that they're really trying to desperately get here. But part of the reason why Bryce Young has not been faring as well as the other rookie quarterbacks is that offensive line is not good. I mean, they got his ankle injured the other week. He has struggled because there's no protection there. I hope that I think they either almost or broke the NFL rushing record in a game against us. I hope they had that and had on their lockers the messaging, all that stuff. Let's erase what happened last year. I'm gonna take the Lions though.
Yeah, I'm going with the Lions as well in this, and I think to your guys' point, I think one of the things that'll help us determine if they are a top 5 team or a middle of the pack team is how they respond in this game, right? This is a game you're going up against a team that has struggled, that is winless. You should win this game. Good teams win this game. They do not lose this game. So if you are really a top 5 NFL team, the Lions have to prove that at Ford Field this Sunday and get a win against this team. And I'm expecting them to do that. Jeff, you brought up the fact that Bryce Young has struggled. That offensive line hasn't looked good. We're finally starting to see this defense with that Aaron Glenn has going, getting pressure on QBs and getting sacks. So it's the right time, right? Their offensive line struggling. Our defensive line, especially in that first half against the Packers, looked really good. I expect them to be able to get pressure on Bryce Young. And our defense has been surprisingly much better against the run this season as well. So hopefully we can keep them contained. Will help stop them from being able to relieve pressure from Bryce Young by running the ball, and we'll be able to be successful here. So I'm going with the Lions as well in this one. I think we were all right last week, improved to 3-1 as we all locked in the Lions again. So if we're all going Lions again here this week, we have a chance to improve to 4-1 as long as they handle business at Ford Field on Sunday. All right. Well, that is what we have here for this evening's show. We want to thank everybody for tuning in. Of course, Mom and Dad, appreciate you being here, and everybody else who's tuning in. Of course, we come to you live every Thursday night on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and Twitter. So whatever your favorite platform is, you can always catch the Lions Grid. If you do enjoy the show, please do help our channels grow. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. And we'll catch you next Thursday, hopefully to celebrate a Lions victory over the Carolina Panthers and talk about that America's Game of the Week as the Lions take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm Kevin Marhine. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Joe, for joining me as always. I appreciate you gentlemen being here, and we'll catch you next week for another episode of the Lions Grid. Have a great night, everybody.
Good night.